Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm very excited to talk about the books I hope to read in May, or some books I think I might read in May. I am going to be doing my TBR game, which is a very fancy way of saying that I use Jane Austen cards that I invented prompts for. Like, that's it, that's the extent of the game, but I have fun with it. And I know that some of you guys seem to like it as well, which is great. But first, before I get into that, I'm actually going to talk about my reading plans for the Spoonies Readathon. You guys know that I don't do readathon specific TBRs too often right now, but this one I really wanted to, and I'm really excited about this readathon. It is a readathon that is all about like spotlighting and like celebrating and learning about people with various disabilities. Also includes chronic illness, mental health and mental illness, neurodivergence, all of that kind of thing. And I'm really excited to be participating. And if you guys aren't aware what like the Spoonie theory is, or spoon theory, both of the hosts have linked to a helpful document, so I will just direct you to their announcement videos, which I'm also linking in my description. So speaking of the hosts, it is being hosted by Emily at Novelle Novels and Naomi at Naomi's Bookshelf. They are the creators and the hosts, and it is running for the whole month of May, and I am really excited to participate, and everybody is welcome. You don't have to have a disability or chronic illness or any kind of neurodivergence to participate. Whether you do or not, you are welcome. And it's meant to be like also a very customizable readathon and a pretty laid back one. It's not going to be super stressful, and it is especially about highlighting invisible disabilities, although of course all people with disabilities or able-bodied people are welcome, as I said. So I'm just going to get into the prompts. Most of them are reading related, but there are a couple that aren't. The first prompt is to read a book by an author that has a disability, and I want to pick up another of Elle McNichol's books, Like a Charm. This is the first in a fantasy series, and I think it's this series is the only thing she has out right now that I haven't read. I've been really loving her books, and Elle McNichol is an autistic author. She's also Scottish, and this is just a really fun cover. I don't know much about this, I just know that I love Elle McNichol, and as I said, autistic authors definitely do count for the readathon because it includes like neurodivergence. The second prompt is to read a book that has a disability that you either relate to or one that you want to learn more about. So kind of regardless of your personal experience with it, you can pick a book for this prompt. And I'm going to read A Flash of Fireflies by Aisha Bushby. This is actually a pretty short novel. It's a middle grade novel that is, I believe, fabulist or a contemporary fantasy. And it is about our main character, who is a young girl who is dealing with a lot. There's I think a lot of changes going on with her and her family, and she also has OCD. And her OCD kind of manifests as these fireflies that tell her to do things. And I've mentioned a few times on my channel before, but I actually do have OCD. I don't tend to read a lot of books that have that representation though, because it can sometimes be very difficult for me. But I've heard good things about this one, and I feel like the kind of story it is going to be hopefully like more approachable for me to read. But I do think it's really great, of course, that we have these books out there. I'm just saying I don't always gravitate to them, but this is one that I really do want to get to, and it was actually my friend Olivia Savannah from Olivia's Catastrophe who put that on my radar. The third prompt is to read a book in an easy to read format, and this prompt makes me so happy. I love that they worded it this way because you know, a lot of times you might have like read a book in an unusual format or one that you don't normally do, or read an audiobook, that kind of thing. And as I talk about very frequently on my channel, audiobooks are very difficult for me. I am finding more lately that I enjoy and get along with, but in general it is still something that is a lot of extra work for me. I have a really hard time processing them, like my auditory processing for them is not great. So an easy to read format for me would absolutely not be an audiobook, it would actually be a physical book. So that's what I'm counting for that one. The next prompt is to read a nonfiction book, and that can be like a memoir, autobiography, kind of general nonfiction, either by a disabled author, or like if it's a biography about a person who has a disability or who had a disability. And I picked Small Victories by Anne Lamott, Spotting Improbable Moments of Grace. I've never read anything by Anne Lamott actually, but she is a very well-known writer who, like, her books are like religious nonfiction, but I think they're very different from what a lot of people might think, is the impression that I've gotten. Like, she is very very funny. She can be very irreverent, and I just like have seen things from her online, like pieces of writing and stuff, and I feel like I'm gonna really get on with her kind of thinking. And I believe this book is specifically about like moments of hope. even when you're really struggling. And one thing that I think I will appreciate is, from everything I've seen, Anne Lamott is not an author who tries to communicate hopefulness by like downplaying how bad things are. And I've kind of talked about that before. That's something that I feel very strongly about. I think for something to be truly hopeful, it has to acknowledge what's actually going on. And the reason I'm counting this book for this readathon is because I know Anne Lamott has struggled a lot with depression, and I know that that comes up in a lot of her nonfiction. And I must have not even flicked through this book before, because I did not realize that the writing is a really beautiful blue color. And then under the dust jacket, it's got her initials in gold. Like, I think that's really pretty. So anyway, I want to read this one. The next prompt is self-care, and that can be basically anything that is self-care for you. I probably will do some knitting. And actually, specifically, I'd like to do knitting on a project that I don't have like a timeline for, because like I love making gifts for people. I'm in the middle of making something for my mom and a couple other things going on, and I love doing that, and I definitely tend to prioritize those, which I think does make sense, you know, when you have them for a specific date or purpose. But I also would like to get better about not feeling bad when I knit things for me, you know, or when I take some time to knit and it's not for something I'm doing for a specific reason or that I need to have done by a certain time. So I would like to just knit in general, but if possible, it'd be nice if I could do a project that I don't have like restrictions for, you know, or like a timeline. The next prompt is to recommend a creator or booktuber, or you can recommend books that have a disability rep. And I want to mention a couple of booktubers who I really love. The first one is Annalisa Ely. I actually saw, I think her videos are where I first heard about the Spoonies Readathon, I think. Annalisa is wonderful, and she reads a lot of fantasy, romance, she reads nonfiction, she reads a lot of age ranges as well, which I really appreciate, but especially she reads a lot of middle grade, and she also highlights a lot of books that are by autistic authors. She talks about a lot of queer books. She specifically does a lot of recommendations for books by asexual authors who have asexual or aromantic rep. So she's just a really great, wonderful channel. She also captions her videos, which is really nice and important for accessibility. So Annalisa is lovely, and I definitely recommend checking her out. I love the way she describes books. That seems like such a basic thing to say about a booktuber, but I feel like she does a really great job of like giving enough detail and specifics that her reviews all feel very unique without like giving too much away for the story, you know? And then I also really wanted to recommend Becca from the Book Sanctum. She also is autistic, and I know that's something that she is seeking out in books as well. She also reads diversely in terms of genre, age range, and representation and everything. She also reads a lot of comics and graphic novels, so if that's something you're looking to get into, Becca just knows like all the things about comic books, especially, so that is something to look into. She also reads a lot of SFF. She also hosts a lot of read-alongs, and I feel like she has a really good mix of some really like well-known and popular books, you know, that you can get her thoughts on, but then she'll also pick up and review ones that I maybe haven't heard of or I don't hear a lot of people talking about, which I think it's always nice to have like that kind of balance. So anyway, really love both Becca and Annalisa. Highly recommend checking them out. I will of course link them below. The next prompt is to read a comfort read, which I love that. I love that kind of prompt. I have one that I could pick, but I'm especially open to changing my mind on this prompt because I kind of just want to pick up like whatever feels cozy and comforting in the moment. But that might be The Scarlet Circus by Jane Yolen. This is a collection of short stories that are all romantic fantasy. And I read a different collection by Jane Yolen a couple months ago and really enjoyed it. There were a couple of stories that were like big misses for me, but overall I liked a lot of them, and I really loved her writing and her ideas. And so even though I feel like I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this one, and what I have heard has been kind of middling, I'm still hopeful. I think I'll like the ideas she has for her stories. So we will see. But yeah, that would be, I think, a fun one to read. Or depending on what I'm feeling like, I could pick up something else that I feel like is cozy, maybe some Jessica Day George, because I've talked about her before as being like really excellent for like cozy fantasy middle grade books, so maybe I'll do that as well, or instead. The next prompt is to research a disability, and I will definitely be doing that. I don't have like a specific idea of what I want us to like read more about or anything, but I will be doing that. And then the final prompt is to read a classic that has disability representation. And this actually, the timing works out perfectly because we should be having, I think at the end of the month, we'll be having our live show for Poor Miss Finch by Wilkie Collins, and that features a main character who is blind. She's a young woman who is blind, and she's in love with this man, and he loves her back, but so does his brother. So I think it's going to be really interesting and dramatic. Reading classics that have disability rep are, you know, always kind of iffy, but I think from what I've heard, this one might handle it better than a lot of them. So that's encouraging. I don't actually have the book with me right now, but we will be reading that for the live show. We haven't like decided when that's happening, so just keep an eye on our social media. That's for Past It Classics, and yeah. So those are my reading plans for the Spoonies Readathon. As I said, I'm really excited. I think this is a wonderful idea for a readathon, and I love how, like I said, customizable it is. So I'm also going to do my TBR game really quickly, or maybe not so quickly. I don't know. Depends on how long it takes me to find the books, but that won't affect you guys. Okay, so I have my cards and my pages. I will be picking, I think, is it 8 every time? I need to remember my own TBR game rules. Yes, okay, I think it's 8. And as I've said before, this is just like, I find it really fun, and I find it a good way to talk about some books I'm excited about, but I am not gonna like punish myself if I don't read these, and I frequently, like, the number of books I actually read from this list can vary quite a lot, but that's fine. Okay, so Mr. and Mrs. Gardner from Pride and Prejudice. That is to read a book that has nature on the cover, because they spend a lot of time walking in nature. There are some big scenes that happen between them and Elizabeth and other characters that are outside and that involve nature. Then I have Emma Woodhouse from Emma. Ooh, okay, that's gonna be a fun one to pick. It is to read a book that is like a Kickstarter that I backed, or that is by an indie author. And the reason I picked that is because Emma Woodhouse is very wealthy, and she's also kind of a leader of society, so she really thinks of herself as somebody who like bestows her patronage on other people, so it seemed appropriate. Isabella Thorpe from Northanger Abbey. That is to read a book that is a friend recommendation, because Isabella is a friend of the main character. Then Mrs. Bennet from Pride and Prejudice. That is to read a book featuring romance, because of course Mrs. Bennet is very fixated on getting her daughters married off. I mean, for like understandable reasons though. Like, I know she can be awful in the ways that she goes about it, but like truly, the reasons make sense, you know, like this was what she had to do to try and take care of them. Mariah Bertram from Mansfield Park. That is to read a book that involves the theater, or I could read a play, anything like that. And that one is because Mariah is one of the characters who are very involved in like the play scene that happens, that is very pivotal in Mansfield Park. And ooh, my fave, my problematic fave, Henry Crawford from Mansfield Park. He is trash, but he is my trash. And then is to read a book by a male author. And I think, is this the final one I'll be picking? Let me do some counting real quick. No, I have one more after this. Charlotte Lucas from Pride and Prejudice. That is to read a book that is a backlist title. So I'm going to count anything that is not published in 2023. I could, if I wanted to make it more of like a truly backlist pick, I could say before 2022, but we'll see. Basically not a new release, and that's because Charlotte is basically viewed as being a spinster at this point. Mrs. Norris is our last one, and she is from Mansfield Park. And that is to read a book that is a standalone, which is because Mrs. Norris is a widow. She's not currently married, so, you know, single, standalone. That's kind of what I was thinking. Okay, so I have my prompts. I am going to gather some books and be back very soon. Okay, friends, the angle is probably different, but I have returned. I have picked my books. I now have a smoothie. Things are good. So for the Isabella Thorpe prompt, which is to read a book recommended by a friend, I thought it would make a lot of sense to pick one of the books that my friends picked for me in my 12 Books, 12 Friends challenge. And I'm going to go with Consumed by Aja Barber. The Need for Collective Change, Colonialism, Climate Change, and Consumerism. This is Olivia Savannah's pick for me, and it is a nonfiction that is about what it says. It's about how climate change is connected to things like capitalism, colonialism, and I've heard that this is like a really actionable book, which I like. For Mariah Bertram, that is to read a play or a book involving theater, and I picked a play that is Cyrano de Bergerac, translated and adapted by Kate Hennig. The original is by Edmond Rostand, and yeah, I'm ready to be in my feelings. Like, I really, really love Cyrano de Bergerac. It's one of my favorite plays, and I have now read a Kate Hennig play, which I loved, so I'm really hoping that I'm gonna love this one. I hope. It looks like, just skimming through, that the style she used is a lot more on the historical side than the other play that I read by her, which I think works for this story. So I am really excited. I think this looks great. Am I gonna cry? Maybe. Then for Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, that is to read a book that has like nature on the cover, and this is the one that I chose to pick 2 books for because we know that I invented that rule for myself in like the first or second month doing this. One I have is Just Ella by Margaret Peterson Haddix. This is a fairly short Cinderella retelling that I've heard people like this first one. I've heard very mixed things about the series overall, but I'm really intrigued by this. Our main character is Ella, and she has, gotten the prince. I think she's married or she's about to be married, and she's realizing that she actually really, really hates being a princess, and she's trying to figure out what to do about that. So I think that'll be really interesting. Then my other pick for this one is The Secrets of Heartwood Hall by Katie Lumsden. I love this cover so much. This book is like even more gorgeous in person. Look at those end papers. And you can see there's obviously flowers on the cover. This is a kind of gothic atmospheric story. We're following a governess named Margaret who is noticing some like weird and spooky things at the place she works. People are telling her not to worry about it, but she thinks something's going on. So it describes it as a chilling gothic mystery and an authentic and atmospheric love letter to Victorian fiction. Kitty Lumsden is a booktuber here, which is also very exciting. And yeah, I just think this looks fantastic. And I also know that this would count for the Spoonies Readathon because I don't know if it's the main character or a different character, but they are partially deaf. Yeah, I've heard fantastic things about this book and I want to actually get to it. For Charlotte Lucas, that is a backlist book, and I said I might do this. It's from 2022, so technically backlist, even though it's not super old, but I really want to read It Sounds Like This by Anna Mariano. I meant to read this, or I hope to read this in April, and obviously did not get to it, but I've loved everything I've read by Anna Mariano, including her other contemporary that I know other people haven't liked as much, so I'm really excited. This is a story involving marching band, and I know it's like a loose take on Snow White, and there's going to be a lot of like interesting and messy like friendships and relationships, and I can't wait. Anna Mariano is just one of my favorite authors. Then for Mrs. Bennet, a book that involves romance, I picked Keeper of Enchanted Rooms by Charlie N. Holmberg. I really like this cover design, and this is, I feel like I'm going to do a really bad job of summing it up. I heard about this from Jess Owens, and she really enjoyed it, and I'm really in the mood for this kind of cozy, I guess, but also kind of like atmospheric or spooky, kind of like romantic fantasy, and our 2 leads end up meeting because the woman is I don't remember what they call it, but she's basically an expert in like keeping spirits in houses like calm, I think, and she gets called in on a job, and that's all I know, or that's all I can summarize right now, but I've heard really good things about that one. Then for Henry Crawford, that is to read a book by a male author, and I picked Why I Am Not Going to Buy a Computer by Wendell Berry. This is a really, really short essay. It's in the Penguin Modern Classics, I think. I don't know if there's like a specific name for these essays. I think it'll be interesting. Then for Emma Woodhouse, that is to read a book by an indie author, or one that I backed on Kickstarter. This is by an indie author, and it is House Perilous by Tansy Rayner Roberts. This is the second book in the Sparks and Filters series. This one actually just came out recently. I read the first book in April, and I absolutely loved it. You'll see whenever my wrap-up goes up. Who knows when that will be. But I'm really, really excited to continue this series. I think the first book might be my favorite thing I've read by the author so far. I don't know. But it's a gaslamp fantasy plus fairy Victoriana, which I would definitely agree with, and I love her writing. I love her characters. I think there are some really interesting character dynamics happening. I think the world is fascinating. very excited to continue. And then finally, for Mrs. Norris, that is to read a standalone, and I picked up The Eternal Return of Clara Hart by Louise Finch. I heard about this one from Aoife at Words of Clover. I don't think I've heard anybody else talk about this, but it sounds fantastic. So this is a contemporary with a slight speculative twist. So our main character is a high school boy or a teenage boy, and this girl Clara Hart ends up hitting his car. Then they run into each other again at a party, and Clara actually dies. And then the next day, our main character wakes up and the same things happen. So he's basically stuck in this time loop trying to figure out why this is happening, and trying to save Clara if he can. And just, I remember Aoife talking about how this book deals a lot with toxic masculinity and violence against women, and I just think it's going to be a really, really interesting way to talk about this topic. Okay. I feel like that was a lot of talking, but those are some things that I am planning to read, hoping to read in May. Please let me know if you are participating in the Spoonies Readathon. As the hosts were saying, it is totally welcome and acceptable to just read 1 or 2 books for it, so let me know that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!